Hello and welcome to The Financial Dad, where I, your average young adult, ask my dad, your not so average financial advisor, all of my burning finance questions. And yes, this is my real dad. This episode, we are going to start a business. And we're in good hands because this man started his own business. So let's talk about where to start. With something this big, how do you know that you're a good fit for running a business?
Oh, well, I personally think there's a kind of a personality that is meant to start a business. If you're not comfortable with the idea that you're the leader and that you're going to be on your own and that you're going to be a lot of hard decisions you have to make, if you like the idea of just sort of being an employee, working around other people, with other people, for other people, you may be better suited to be an employee and not have your own business. I think the number one thing, though, is leadership and vision. To own your own business, you have to be a leader personality, and you have to have a vision of what it is that you think you're going to accomplish and do in the future. Without that, it doesn't matter whether you have the right skill set or not, because there's nobody else to have that vision and do that leadership without you. So it has to be you.
So if you've figured out that you're a good fit for being a leader in business, where do you start?
I think a place to start, because I think financially usually, is how are you going to pay your bills while you do whatever you're going to do to start this off. So how is that going to work? Do you have a stream of income that will come in right from the very beginning? Or will you take some kind of a loss of income and you're going to have to make that up somehow for a period of time? How long will you have to do that for, et cetera? So a little bit of financial planning about how it will actually work. This is the thinking part before you actually take any actions, I would say. Once you're really ready and you think, it's time to start something up, what you're going to do is you're typically going to decide what kind of entity you're going to have, if any. So an entity is something like a corporation or an LLC or a partnership, something where it's not necessarily you on your own. If you are just on your own and you don't have an entity, that would be called a sole proprietorship. But if you have an entity, then it's not just you kind of on your own. There's actually something that has an existence outside of you. To have that, you have to get that entity started and registered, and that's usually in your state. Whatever state you're in has an office where they start new businesses, and you have to make sure you have a name that somebody else doesn't have the same name, so that you're not creating a problem with someone else. You file some paperwork with the state, and you pay a fee typically, and before you know it, you actually have a business entity in place. Since there are certain things required, like for example bylaws maybe, and certain kinds of actions taken by a director, for example the main leadership, something that makes you president, for example, it's really kind of common for this to be done by using a service rather than just sort of trying to do it completely on your own. And there are services that help you with it. There are legal services. There are private company services that help you actually create the business and have all of the formal paperwork ready so that you are not only in business, but you also have governance. You have a properly named president.
Structural hierarchy.
Yeah, all the things that need to be in place to actually be operating a business. It's easier to get that from the outside than to try to do it on your own, in all honesty. Once you've done that, you have an entity, but you don't have any branding, you don't have a website, you don't have a blog, you have nothing else. So all in the preparation process, all of those things, you have to figure out, how am I going to do all these things? What am I going to have? What am I not going to have? And get them in place. So now you have an entity. It's time to start putting money into the entity and paying the bills to get all those things into place so that you can be ready to start marketing your service or your product. But eventually, you're ready to go. And it's time to figure out who your clients are going to be and reach out to them and try to get them as clients to work with you and start to get some income coming in. So, I mean, those are really the basic steps of the whole process.
So once you are set up, you've got all of the elements that you need to run a business, and you've started getting clients, you're starting to make an income off of it. How does that work with taxes? Is there a specific way that your company's income will be taxed? Do you have to have like a specific tax ID? How does that work?
Well, tax ID, yes. Part of the process of filing for your business will also be to file with the Internal Revenue Service to get a tax ID number, which will end up on your tax returns. As to income taxes for the business, virtually all, well, the federal government, it's pretty much its largest source of taxes is personal taxes, but corporate taxes are right after that, meaning companies that pay a tax on income. So you're going to have to file a tax return. The thing is, in a lot of businesses, early in the business, there isn't a profit. You don't owe income taxes if you don't have a profit.
Okay.
So you may not have any income taxes for the first 2 or 3 years that you're in operation. If you do, you not only have to pay all your other bills, you now have to pay your taxes as well. And if you have taxes to pay, typically you're going to pay that by quarterly withholding of those taxes and send that off to the Internal Revenue Service on a quarterly basis. If you have any state income taxes, you're going to do the same to your state. So if you don't pay it on a quarterly basis, by the time tax filing time rolls around, you will find that you probably owe some kind of penalties and or interest for not filing in a timely manner.
Yeah, so that's an important thing to keep in mind.
It is.
Yeah. So what if in the creation of this business, you need to make a business plan or you need to raise funds? How would you go about doing those things?
Okay, well, a business plan is a really critical tool to helping you figure out certain things that are going to help you be more successful in the business. Something as simple as who will be your competitors and how will you compete against them? What will be different about you that will make you able to sell your product, your service, in a crowded marketplace where there are already people doing what you're trying to do, and you may have to take business away from someone else to get any business. Why would they come to you? So things like that you will answer in a business plan. Other aspects of it are things like how many employees do you think you'll need and at what point in time, and how will you pay for those people? How will you market? How will you advertise? Will you do publicity things? Will you do direct mail things? So, how are you going to go out and get these clients eventually? How will you finance everything is a part of the business plan. So that business plan is very important, and it leads us to how will you finance everything?
Where's the money going to come from?
Where's the money going to come from? So for a lot of people, that business plan says you're going to need maybe more money than you have lying around, which means you've got to either try to make money faster, delay things till you've saved more money, right? Or you've got to get the money from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the somewhere else's fall into several typical categories. One thing that people can do that they're sometimes not aware of, it may or may not be a good idea, but you can borrow up to $50,000 out of a 401k or profit sharing plan at your company. You have to pay it back over 5 years. But that can be a source of money for a startup if you want to. One other problem, if you leave the company and you want to take that all your 401k or profit sharing money with you, now you got to pay off the loan. So you may want to just leave the money there until you get the loan paid off. So that's one, but that is one source of up to $50,000 of money. A second source is any other retirement or savings money that you have stashed away someplace else. And then you have the friends and family route. That's kind of the next one. Can someone loan you a little bit of money to make up that difference? The final route for most small entrepreneurs is the banks, the Small Business Administration, borrowing money from one of those or both of those kinds of entities. And this is sort of the approach of last resort, because it's not really that great to have to owe money to the bank. It's very difficult to get a bank loan early in a business. It's easier to get an SBA loan for a new startup business than it is a bank loan, but there are an awful lot of hoops to jump through to get an SBA loan. Nonetheless, that is one of the options to help finance to get it off the ground.
Okay, so now let's say we're financed and, we're set up. We've got our business plan, everything. We got our website. We've got an office space. We are fully set up. How do you start to consider employees and how you can afford them? Do you set anything up before you can hire employees in terms of liability? How does that work?
Well, your business plan should say basically for what types of things you think you're going to need employees as you grow. Typically, it's going to be things that you either are not going to have the time for, or don't have the expertise or skill set for on some level. So the what of it should be kind of known in advance. When you are going to start getting employees, you should have an employment law attorney. You should have that attorney help you draft a manual that will be the employee manual for the company, and it will set up a series of policies that make sure that the company stays in compliance with federal laws on employment as well as state laws or local laws on employment. And that's going to be something that you're going to give to every employee as you bring them on. You're going to ask them to read it. You're going to ask them to sign a statement that says, I've read it, I understand it, and here's my X, so that they know that they're going to be held responsible for meeting what's within that manual. The other issue with new employees, there's workman's compensation insurance you may have to purchase once you have employees. And then you get into the whole question of company benefits. Am I going to provide medical insurance? Am I going to provide disability, life insurance, health spending accounts, some sort of retirement plan for them? You get into those questions. But a primary question to face before you decide to get employees is whether or not what you need done can be done by independent contractors or by an outside service versus you hiring an employee. Every employee you hire is a person whose life becomes dependent upon you, and it becomes somebody who unfortunately could also sue you for something one day. So the fewer employees you have in general, the better off that you are. So if a service can handle something for you, it's better to have a service. If an independent contractor or independent contractor firm can handle something for you, it's better to start there. It's also easier to end those relationships if something isn't working out versus an employee. So, that's generally what's going to happen as you start to look for employees. One other thing about employees would be to consider whether or not it might be some existing testing kinds of things that can help you drill down on employees and whether or not at a deeper level they have the skill set that you're looking for. Because I have found a lot of times people look on the surface like they could probably do a job, but they were missing something. And in the process of hiring, you may miss that. So there are certain kinds of skill testing things that are out there that are legal. Make sure it's a legal one. And that you can use to more deeply test people that you're considering for hiring.
To make sure that they're a good fit.
Yep.
Okay. And now I mentioned liability earlier, and you mentioned workman's compensation. Are those the same thing, or are they different things?
Well, workman's compensation insurance will pay if the individual is injured on the job while working for the company. Disability insurance, for example, which would normally help them pay their bills if they get disabled, typically it's not designed if they get disabled working. It's really more for
in general.
An illness of some kind or an accident, something like that. There are liability coverages also that employers can purchase that will cover them from liability if they get sued by an employee for something like wrongful termination, something like that.
Okay. Let's talk about physical elements of planning for a business.
Okay.
How do you go about thinking about what you'll actually need in terms of a space or equipment when it comes to a business?
Well, part of planning out a business is envisioning the environment in which the work will take place. So today, when it comes to an office space, a lot of people are doing things remotely that years ago they would have gotten 3,000 square feet of office space for or something like that. So you have to consider, to what degree are you willing to be remote versus having to be in person? Do you need a conference room, for example, where physical clients are going to show up and you're going to try to sell them whatever it is that you sell them? Or is sales done by you going out to a client, or by you going on Zoom and looking at a client, or on by you going out and being on a telephonic call with a client, rather than being in person with a client, so that having a conference room is unnecessary, for example. So the decision about a space is based upon today. Do you really need a physical space, or are you going to be remote? If you need a physical space, a good commercial realtor can help you get started with that, because they can help you determine sort of what you want that space to look like, what the building should look like, what kind of location you're looking for, how much space you need, those kinds of things. When it comes to equipment, there are certain things that offices just simply need. Every individual today is going to need a computer, right? And it may need to be a laptop so that they can work from an office space or from remotely from home. They're going to need internet access from home. They're going to need internet access, obviously, from where you are. They're going to need fax access, copier. Today, it's a fax, copier, scan, printer. It's all in one, right? And which is wonderful. They're going to need that. You're going to need a telephone system. You're going to need an email system. You're going to need a URL that's the newbusiness.com, so that you can be Marianne at thenewbusiness.com and Charlie at thenewbusiness.com. So these are all the kinds of filing cabinets if you're going to have paper files, and space for those paper files.
So you kind of need to go through and think about, okay, what are we doing here? What do we actually need on a day-to-day basis to accomplish
Absolutely. And part of your planning process should be, what will that cost? How do I build that into my plan? And how will I get it? From where will I get it?
You brought up having a URL. I'm wondering, how do you go about branding things? How do you trademark? How do you copyright? Where do you go to do those things?
Okay, well, trademark and copyright are legal things. Lawyers typically can file that stuff for you. Again, there are online services. There's an online service for pretty much anything we could possibly talk about here. But lawyers have traditionally done a lot of that work as well. So if you want to copyright something that's going to be important information, or get a trademark or a service mark of some kind, getting legal help with that is the way that most people would go about it at that early phase. As to branding in general, you may have an idea in mind for a brand and a logo look and some of those visual kinds of things. If you're a visual person, that's great. I personally am not. So in my history, I have had, generally speaking, people that design websites, people that do graphic design, I have had to hire them and go through a process of describing what I see in my head and having them make it look like something good instead of what it would have been had I done it myself. I created almost stick figures once when I was trying to do a logo. Not very good. So, those are professionals in that area. You work with somebody who's good with that. It is a world of difference versus trying to do it on your own if it is not something you really, really are very good at. Remember, when you're creating a brand, you're hoping you're going to create something that a lot of people are going to see one day, and that it's going to be a very successful brand. So it's really, really important. And then everything that you have is going to flow from that. So, for example, your website is going to have that. If you have any brochures, it's going to have your branding, your logo, et cetera, on it. Your emails, largely today, everybody has their branding on their emails. There was a day when people actually wrote physical letters. And, so they had stationery and that had branding, that had their logo and everything on it. So, but you're always putting yourself out there with your brand. So all of that collateral material has to also have the brand planning going on with it.
So now that everything is set up, what are the maintenance items that we need to keep in check to make sure everything is running smoothly?
Well, it's a good question, although when you're starting a small business, you're running everything, so you know whether it's running smoothly or not. You don't have to check it doesn't take
very
long
hard
to check. I mean, there are things like, as you grow, how is your salesperson doing if you've hired a salesperson at helping grow the company? How is a service person doing at servicing the
Yeah.
customers of the company? Are all of the computers, working properly? Is the website working properly? Are people getting their emails through
Yeah.
properly? I actually have a philosophy of management by exception. You don't really have to do an awful lot except pay attention to when something goes wrong. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? How do we fix it? Who's going to fix it? By when will we fix it?
Yeah.
And getting it fixed so that in the future you don't have that problem again. And if you're constantly putting out those fires by improving and improving and improving, you'll have fewer of those fires in the future. And you're also have to be thinking all the time about improving. There's a concept that a leading coach I heard years ago called CANEI, C-A-N-E-I, constant and never-ending improvement. And I don't recall who had it, but it is a really wonderful way to think. What you want to be doing is working on your business, not in your business. If you think of that distinction. I want to make my business better all the time. I don't want to be the person who's answering the phone.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's what I viewed myself as working towards in my businesses, that I wanted to be the one who's looking down from 10,000 feet and saying, how can this be better? How do we improve upon this? Rather than me being the person who's giving the actual advice or fixing the actual problem or running the computer or whatever it might be. I'm blessed that I got to a position of doing that, but that's what a lot of hard work is really about.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a lot of really helpful information. I'm hoping that if you are thinking of starting a business or just getting interested in the possibility, that you have a clear idea of where to start. Congratulations, you have made it through the entire video series. I hope you are feeling so much better prepared for your own financial journey, and thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you have any questions for us, feel free to reach us at our website, and make sure to click on to the next.